So good morning. Thank you for the introduction. Again, my name's Julia, and I'm Director of Product Management and Product Marketing at Rubicon Labs. We provide IoT security and identity as a service. Oh, I see myself up on the screen, too. So today's presentation, I'm going to talk about identity. Why identity, and why it's needed for IoT. IoT is enabling value-added services. It's not just that we're buying and selling hardware, it's that we're enabling services on top of that hardware. Think your connected light bulb. We're enabling services not just to have that connected light bulb, but we're enabling services for security, for environmental reasons on that light bulb. Security, identity though, needs, and these services can only be used if they have security. So I'm going to talk about asymmetric and symmetric cryptography, both their advantages and their trade-offs. And with that security, is there a way we could move the picture? I'm going to talk about how you can scale security with these different advantages from both the cloud down to the very lowest sensor. So we're all here at IoT Summit. Why is the IoT market exploding? We're here because we see this trend of 20+ billion devices by the end of 2019. And I was staggered to see ARM is expecting to ship 1 trillion IoT chips in the next 20 years. 1 trillion. We don't often see trillion. We're using these in all sorts of applications. Smart home, infrastructure, automation, our cars. And as Rainer pointed out, we're using these to connect to the cloud, to enable a lot of big data analytics, control, and predictive maintenance. But all of that needs security. Security down to our phones, down to our computers, down to the gateway. But IoT is far more than that. IoT is all connected devices. Or maybe I should say any connected device. Once it's connected, it's an IoT device, including all the small devices far below the gateway. ARM is expecting to ship 2 billion Cortex-M-class MCUs is shipping every quarter right now. And I'm sure that's going to grow. These are really low resource devices. They're memory constrained, mainly for one application, and they're oftentimes battery powered. They make up this cybermass of IoT. A cybermass that is in a lot of different applications. If you think of a connected car, you have hundreds of sensors right now in a new connected car. You have thousands in infrastructure in a smart factory. You have them in embedded devices in medical. You have them in agricultural fields. So tomorrow's IoT cybermass is enabling services. They're enabling a variety of services. And someone I was talking to just a little while ago, he has a hardware platform. He said, I thought we were selling a hardware platform. Turns out now we're selling a service. You remain connected to your customer for brand loyalty, for additional revenue services for years to come, basically for the life of that device. Services such as predictive maintenance, transition to OpEx services where you're not just selling that piece of hardware, but you're continuing to collect revenue off of it. New revenue streams that, in 2 years ago, we didn't even see there. New revenue streams that will continue to change. And so you'll continue to want to connect to that device with new business model updates as you're able to. Or also for metered usages. Usages where you sell a device and you sell it only to be used in the US because there's other regulations in Europe and you don't want it used there. But they could pay for additional services to be used in Europe. Or over time, if you only pay for it from 8 to 5, but not for 24 hours a day. People only want to use what they pay for now, or what they want to pay for. And that's really part of this moving from a CapEx to OpEx. Let's look at an example, a tractor. A big, one-time, gigantic purchase for a farmer. But John Deere does not see it that way. John Deere sees it as a continuous connected link to their farmer. They have a JD Link communication where they're continuously able to update their tractors, to know them in the background, to be able to add services on top of it. So it's not when the farmer decides to come in to have service, or if he pays someone else to have a service, they're able to sell the ability to say, hey, I can remote program your tractor. Or I can be able to provide you updates and maintenance as we talked about earlier today. Or reprogram something as it becomes available. So there's that one-time purchase that they have, but they continuously are monitoring their purchase, the purchase for the farmer, and they're continuously being able to support that farmer in the long run. So it's not just that one-time upfront purchase that sits in the farm that they have no idea where it is. Instead, it's really building a brand loyalty over the long run, being connected to your customer. Let's look at another example. Predictive maintenance and quality. Some of us may have come on a plane. This morning I didn't, which I was pleased not to. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that when you hear there has been some kind of issue, there's some kind of maintenance needed on your plane, you have a huge collective, oh. We don't like being delayed for maintenance issues on planes. But I was just astounded by the number of Rolls-Royce VP, which makes a lot of jet engines, said last year at a conference, it cost $50,000 an hour for a plane in unplanned maintenance. $50,000 an hour just waiting, sitting for unplanned maintenance. So it's not just us that's annoyed at the airline. It's the airline that needs to be able to control this, that needs to be able to say, I can make sure that I'm not going to hit this. And they do that by predictive maintenance. Predictive maintenance, though, is enabled by IoT. IoT sensors throughout the airplane and throughout the airliners, where they can say, with their big data analytics, that after a certain amount of time of a turbine, if it has a slight adjustment, that's going to need to be repaired. And they're going to do it while there's downtime on the plane instead of while other people are waiting for it. So IoT revenue is in jeopardy without identity for those devices, though. And this revenue is huge. It's growing to over $200 billion by the end of this decade, just in 3 years. And the global IoT market is expected to be $3 trillion by 2025. $3 trillion. But none of these services are possible without secure identity. And any connected device can become a target. Let's look at an example, and that's the Dyn DDoS attack from last October. I personally think it was a seminal security moment. There's not a lot of them. I mostly think of it as Heartbleed and the Dyn attack with the Mirai code. It was in the mainstream media, that's for sure, where the New York Times wrote, hackers use new weapons to disrupt major websites across the US. Those new weapons were 30+ cameras, videos, routers, speakers. Now I know some of these devices had terrible security. Hard-coded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 passwords, not a good idea, right? But this happened with all of these devices. And I gotta be honest, when I go home, and maybe this is for other people, and I go to my mom's house, I can pretty much guess that her name, the word password, and a few numbers she picks are basically every password she has, right? We need security. And this attack took out the internet for large metropolitan areas of the country. And it was done with 100,000 devices. That's a lot of devices, and it had a big impact on some very large websites. But when you think that we're going to have billions in just the next few years and trillions in 20 years, it is really just a drop in the bucket. So security is going to be required. As Reiner talked about a bit, in some cases it's really being pushed already. And it's going to be required in areas where in other places security or other issues have become, and it's being pushed. It's going to be required in some kind of certifications. So we need security and identity for all of these devices. No identity is no service. And no service, no identity, is no safe IoT devices. And we need it from the cloud down to the smallest of sensor. So why doesn't our current security solution scale? Security's been connected before. We have a lot of web browsers in our pockets. They're connected. It's called the web, right? Let's mimic what we would do as IoT browsers. Let's mimic IoT as if we had web browsers for all of our IoT devices. So we have a server, and we're going to connect across the world a lot of browsers to our server. But what's really interesting is all those browsers are actually anonymous. And this is actually done by design. So when you reach out to Amazon.com, Amazon says, hey, I'm Amazon. And you say, hey, I'm Chrome. I'm a web browser. That's it. So your HTTPS is really one-way authentication with you saying, I'm whatever your browser is with a little bit more of a user string in there. But that's it. The authentication of you or me to my bank or me to Amazon is really done by a username and password. But this is one-to-one user authentication. This does not scale to IoT. I'm not behind, or any of us are behind, the thousands of devices of IoT that are being installed. So we need to replace user identity with IoT identity. So how do you securely scale this, and how do you get a secure identity for these devices? And how do you do it at scale? Scale where there are more connected devices in the world than there are people. Identity in the digital world is done through cryptography. There are two types of keys, asymmetric keys and symmetric keys. I'm going to talk first about asymmetric keys. So asymmetric keys really are made up with two parts, a public key and a private key. I put here for an example of a 2048-bit public and private key. To validate it, you take the public key and you use the certificate authority. And you send your public key there to really authenticate it and to certify it, and you get back a certificate. The private key, you need to keep secret. There's a process to this. You need to manage it, provision, and revoke as needed for your certificate, and update it as required. For your private key, you need to protect it, execute on it securely, update it, and back it up. You don't want to lose that. So asymmetric keys solve our key provisioning problem. You have your public and your private key. The private key is kept secret, but the keys are expensive to generate, and they're based on very large algorithms, mathematical algorithms. But it solves very well from our cloud, our data center, down to our gateway, our phones, our laptops. It works very well. But it doesn't always scale to some of the low-resource devices that right now don't have any security on them. We were talking to one customer that was saying, you know, I can't fit many K bytes of a flash on my device right now. And this is actually a stack. It's the lightest stack I could find. It was from Lightweight Crypto Conference a year and a half ago. It's 70 K bytes of flash. That's a lot of flash for some of these low-resource devices. So when you're talking these single-function MCUs that we have scattered throughout a lot of different industries and a lot of different verticals, how do we do that? These devices that are based on really simple, for an example, Cortex M-class devices. How do we provision that security? So let's look at an example at one of those verticals and one of those segments, and that's medical. Embedded medical devices for chronic healthcare needs have a lot of requirements. One is low power. Think your defibrillator or pacemaker in your heart. When you want to replace the battery, it's an operation, right? They cut it open, they replace it. These batteries need to last for years. You need secure data. Whenever you go to your doctor and you want to have your medical data sent from one doctor to another, you have all those HIPAA forms and all. There's a good reason for those forms. And so we need to make sure the data and the medical data that we have in embedded devices can really be secure also. They also need to be signed and authenticated updates. If I have an embedded device, I really don't want to be walking into a conference thinking somebody else in this conference could update my device. Instead, all I want to know is the medical device manufacturer or my doctor has the ability to do that, and that's it. And when you don't have identity security on these issues, it can be a big issue. Both a safety issue and also a company issue. Last summer, St. Jude Medical had an issue with their devices. It was a defibrillator pacemaker, an embedded device, this one. And the hedge fund, Muddy Waters, or maybe I should say Notorious Hedge Fund, hopefully nobody works there or worked there, Muddy Waters basically came out and said there were cybersecurity vulnerabilities in implantable heart devices. They didn't say that people had died because of them. They didn't say people were creating these changes and updating these devices. All they said was there was vulnerabilities. But as a result of that vulnerability comment in the news, St. Jude's Medical stock plunged 8% that day. That is a big impact. But it's not only the impact. Yes, stock can bounce back up. It's also an impact because, oh, sorry, I think I may have skipped. It's an impact because it affects your brand. Identity is not just an insurance anymore. It can impact the company's bottom line. And it can really cost the brand equity. People spend years building up their brands, right? All of us do. You don't want to have a quick hammer to it. I don't know the cost implications to the St. Jude and what it would take to rebuild that brand. I'm sure they have hundreds of people working on that now. But they need to build it. They need to rebuild and gain trust in that brand, especially for a medical application. So where might we also see this repeat? Let's look at smart buildings. There's a lot of infrastructure and sensors going into smart buildings right now. These are not sensors that we're going to quickly change. These are built into these smart buildings that are going to last there for a long time. In the HVAC systems, in other areas, right? Cameras, security, environmental reasons. There's a lot of advantages to why we want to have smart buildings. And why we want to have thousands of sensors built into them. But those sensors will be there for a while. And with those advantages comes vulnerabilities. You need privacy of your data. Our companies have control and security, but you don't want three-letter government acronyms coming in and looking at your company data. You don't want other companies coming in and looking at your data. You need privacy. You need privacy of your data. You need security. You don't want your company to be kind of a TSA pre-check for everyone. So once you replace a mechanical device with a connected device, you better control it. So this is kind of a funny example, but I liked it. We all know the light switches. I guess they're not very fancy. And a hotel in London thought, well, it'd be really cool if we got rid of the mechanical light switches and we put Android light switches. I'm sure they look super chic, super nice in this modern hotel. And it controlled not only the lights, it controlled the curtains opening, it controlled, I think, the thermostat, and it controlled a few other things. I think you could turn on maybe some music from it. But the issue came in when it broke. And so I was reading this article that was talking about this. So this guy sees, oh, my light switch in my room is broken, I can't use it. And I'm not sure what a lot of people would do, but I personally, and I'm sure a lot of us in this room, would just start poking at it and saying, I can fix this, don't worry about it. So he finds, very easily, the IP address. Oh, okay, then IP address, great. Oh, that's funny, my room number is 714. Small world that 714 is in the IP address. They used the IP address as the identifier for this device. And I'm sure the person who's setting this all up in this hotel, the IT person thought, this is a great idea. When room 515 calls and says their lights are out, I can just go and say, IP address 515, reset it, I can change their curtains for them, we're all set. But now anybody can change the curtains on anyone's room. And I thought it was kind of amusing if someone would have gone through and like changed all the room numbers so it said something. But that is definitely a brand equity. This was not a Four Seasons, but like if Four Seasons had this and all of a sudden it says something on the side of a Four Seasons, that's a huge brand problem, right? You can't have that. So you better control it. You better authenticate it. And with that, you need identity. With 1 trillion IoT devices in the future, how do you control them? And how do you do this at scale? So we've talked about the fact that asymmetric crypto doesn't always scale. So how do you provide some security down to these low resource devices? Rubicon Labs and other companies are solving this with symmetric cryptography. I talked about the fact there were 2 kinds of keys, asymmetric and symmetric. Symmetric keys are based on much smaller keys, so 16 bytes of random data, easy to generate. And symmetric algorithms are much smaller code footprint, require a lot less memory, and they're faster. The difficulty with symmetric cryptography is you need a shared secret. You need one point where there's trust, and then you use that trust point to share a secret. When you have that secret, though, once you have it, you have unique identity, and you have a very efficient method to be able to solve and provide security, unique identification to all your devices. And what's interesting is simpler sometimes is stronger. So NIST recommended key sizes for 128 bits for symmetric key is 3072 for RSA and 256 for ECC. It's also faster, so 4,000 times faster than RSA, and signing and validation is ECC is 400 times faster for symmetric. But what I think is more important is that asymmetric crypto's power usage, especially for these low resource devices, is 400,000 times more efficient than RSA 2048 sign, and 20,000 times more efficient than ECDSA verify. So symmetric keys are simpler to generate. The 2 parties must share a secret to communicate. The keys must be provisioned prior. Oh, excuse me, sorry about that. But once you have the key provisioned, the algorithms are much faster and they're lower power. So how do we share an identity up front to be able to use these low power algorithms? So we're taking advantage at Rubicon of the fact that HSMs, or hardware security modules, are really becoming commodities, and they're scaling. HSMs have been around for 20 years. They're used in the banking industry. They have a lot of advantages. They're well known. And HSMs are commoditized now, and we can take advantage of the fact that they're in key provisioning up front in the semiconductor side, and also they scale at the cloud. Let's look at the cloud side. Oh, sorry, I'm going to touch on this first. You'll see you can provision a key now by using an HSM right into a semiconductor device. You'll also use it as a cloud at the cloud side to be able to protect your data. Once these devices are installed in thousands within these different sectors and verticals. And now we can take advantage of the fact that HSMs, or hardware security modules, are easily scalable. You can create an instance of them at both AWS and Microsoft Azure. So AWS has Cloud HSM, where you can quickly create an instance of it, or Microsoft Azure has Key Vault. So with these changes, we can take advantages of the symmetric cryptography. And with those advantages, we can be able to provision symmetric keys. which then allows us to be able to use symmetric crypto, which is easier to protect while being used, which is your most common attack point. They're stronger bit for bit. They're faster, as we talked about earlier. They're lower power usage, which is really critical for these low resource devices. They're lower cost per key. They require less memory, critically for IoT. They're also quantum resistant. So I want you to take away, symmetric is a very real choice. But in conclusion, for sure, no matter what your IoT application is that you're designing right now, you need unique, secure identity. No identity means you can't build a service on it. And if you can't build a service on it, you really don't have a viable IoT market. So IoT is forcing us to evaluate our methods. That's why we're all here today, right? And no matter what your device target is, that itself will determine your cryptographic choice. But no matter what, IoT devices need secure identity. Thanks. I know we were way over break, so if anyone has any questions, I will be around.
We are almost on the time for the, take one question, go ahead.
Can you define quantum resistant?
Yeah, so quantum resistant symmetric algorithms basically are picking basically are taking a number and trying to pick it. RSA is based on the fact that we think it's very difficult, and our current computers think it's very difficult to, sorry? To factorize prime numbers. And also ECC is based on picking points along an elliptic curve. So once we have quantum computers, those mathematical algorithms are going to be much easier, much faster. And so that's why symmetric cryptography does not rely on that and is quantum resistance. If you want to double your key size, then you basically increase your strength.